that indicate it actually, it will cover up, it will be occluded. So I think this is, not me, we think this is, why our system kind of rely on the binocular input and to activate the representation of faces that have different proximity from the observer, like me, like you. And to simplify the illusion, this is what we find trying to explain this illusion with this. As an observer, if you see two people like that, if you can see one person, one face is on top of the other, that indicates or signifies some differences in terms of proximity. So it's kind of implicit, indicated we have a representation, a quite implicit representation of proximity of people in the environment. Next question is, since we know how robust the effect is, the phenomenon is, and we know how we can, interpret this phenomenon at this time, and the question comes in is why we have this? How much we can benefit out of it, right? Does this helpful, in terms of survival in the environment? Although it doesn't really matter. Now we're living in the city and not in the jungle. But still, that might have some significance there. Why we have this capacity, quite implicit. So what we do is we try to ask, if you present some socially relevant information on the face, whether that can manipulate the perception of proximity of faces that can be revealed by the size of this illusion. So what we did was to manipulate one of the most important social cues on face, which is dominance. So dominance is kind of indicated, the ability to control, manipulate the situation, such and such, and it actually played a very significant role in our social perception of people, individuals. And so dominance has been studied in social psych quite extensively over the past 15 years. And therefore, there are a lot of software being available to help you create different faces with, verify their dominance on face. You can manipulate them without really knowing what it actually does. So this is very good. We have a tool. We'll be able to manipulate those facial dominance, and also at the same time manipulate their ethnicity as well, because we want to see how, general it is, whether the dominance can really modulate the face being perceived as closer or further away. And we also did the study across 3 countries, and definitely we include participants, Asian, Caucasian, and also we want to use face, represent different race groups as well. So what's our hypothesis? I have no idea what the black here. I think that's another technical issue, but focus on the green ones. So our hypothesis is, dominance is such a, facial dominance is such a significant social trait that actually play a lot of roles in our, modulating our behaviors. And so whenever it's important, we probably will see that as the person with dominant traits as closer to us, as compared to submissive faces. So that's our prediction. And how we're going to measure this with the illusion that we found so robust. And actually, it's a very good way we can do this, just based on the basic psychophysics. So whatever you have, if you want to detect a signal, which is noted by delta R, so you need it's actually relevant to how the signal, how strong the signal is at this time, right? So what this mean is, in this context, is if the faces or the person are close to us, to be able to perceive the differences in terms of their proximity, and we need actually a slightly smaller amount of signal. Therefore, on the other hand, is what I'm saying is when faces are closer to us, we perceive close to us, the difference between the two, differences in the proximity between the two faces will be likely to be detected. So the illusion should be larger as compared to the faces being perceived as further away. So this is one way how to explain our prediction, and in terms of the illusion, the size of the illusion. And a more straightforward way, another way to explain this hypothesis analysis will be using a perspective. I hope you can see this is a very busy photo. So what you saw, please ignore the Fuji mountain in the background. What I want you to pay attention to is all those poles, the electric poles here, lying on the street. So you can imagine, usually, in the city, those poles are at this equal distance, lying away. But from your perspective, the poles further away, the distance between the two poles are actually much closer as compared to the poles are actually closer as to the observer. So that's a more straightforward way to demonstrate how this illusion can be manipulated by our perception of distance. This is our data. Dominant faces, submissive faces, and the y-axis indicate the size of the illusion. Although it looks small, but it's significant, a lot of zeros. So what you can see is dominant face pair actually induce stronger illusion as compared to submissive ones. And that's a line in consistent with our prediction that wow, it seems like we really implicitly perceive dominant face as something closer to us. And to replicate what we found here, and we actually did quite a lot of studies with slightly different design. And another way to more directly to reveal this effect is what if we pair a dominant face with a submissive face in this way, right? And then when you manipulate which face is on top, which face is at the bottom. And you can see on the right, all these schematic figures shown. If the dominant is at the top, but the submissive face at the bottom, actually the distance between the two faces should be closer. So therefore the illusion should be much smaller as compared to when the dominant face at the bottom and the submissive face at the top, right? So if we really see dominant face as it's something closer to us as compared to submissive faces, right? This is a much easier way to think about, this is a really actually better way, more sensible way to measure this. Unfortunately, we didn't talk about that at the beginning. And so you can imagine, so you can see, this is exactly what we found. So whether the dominant face is at the bottom or top actually has significant impact in terms of how we perceive the illusion. The illusion is much stronger when the dominant face is at the bottom as compared to what's at the top. So with slightly different manipulation, different designs, we reached the conclusion, quite consistent conclusion in terms of how we implicitly perceive the proximity of face can be manipulated by the social trait of face. Quite unexpectedly, when we did the study, we did the study across countries with participants from different races, Asian, Caucasian, and some other non-disclosed participants. And we have faces of different races as well. So it just gave us a good opportunity to examine. If we code the faces in terms of whether the face is own or other race with the participant, what we can see in terms of the illusion, right? Because race is a very strong social category of individuals, right? So it indicates the membership, indicates a lot of social consequences. And actually, I study a lot, like Lucas just introduced, about how babies are sensitive to race of babies and become a little bit racist before they have the first birthday party. I think that might affect their, who is coming to the party. So why not? Why not? Let's start to look at the race. We have similar, predictions about race. If it's other race faces, other race individuals, they should be close to us because this is something. Time distance, when a baby, I'm not sure how familiar you are with babies, is they're very sensitive to novel signals, novel people, the people they don't see in their environment, such as strangers, such as experimenters, such as other race individuals. There's a term called strange awareness. That's something we want touch the similar idea. If you see something that's not with your own race group, you'll probably see them as closer. Think about this as a kind of defense mechanism that you want to be adaptive, you want to be alert if there's something strange that existed in your surroundings. Own race will be safer. That's okay to further away. That's exactly what we found. So we use a similar design, just recode the data in terms of the ethnicity, in terms of race. Other race faces actually was perceived, was shown a stronger illusion as compared to own race faces. And remember here, we have participants of different races. So this effect cannot be interpreted based on the ethnicity or the race of the face, but it's the membership of the race that matched the participant. So it seems like we actually have a quite extensive representation of proximity of faces that we see, but we don't aware that this part of the representation explicitly. We ask our participant, what do you think about this face on the screen? Do you think it's closer to you or farther away to you? The participant say, are you okay? That's something on the screen, but this is something you see that through this illusion. It gives us a very sensitive measure, and it matches, just the conclusion I show you is consistent with a lot of social psych studies in terms of person's personal space and how we're sensitive to threat signals in our environment. Okay, so this is very exciting, but I have the last piece. It's even cooler. Where does this come from, right? It seems like there's an evolutionary story here. We're sensitive to the signal. We're sensitive to the individuals that is, novel, strange, doesn't really represent in our environment. Therefore, we put them closer and to give them a priority in terms of processing. But another way to think about this, there might be a developmental story as well, because as I show you a picture of a crowd that through this cheap webcam. So we learn this in our everyday interactions. It might not be something just we're born with. So that's a good opportunity to study developmental perspective of the solution. I was very, very excited last year. We're finally being able to do this. And I didn't expect that the result would be even more exciting. So what we want to do, we did this in a very boring way, just like what I showed you. And the first thing we want to do is try to replicate what we found. So how to replicate? We want to replicate the race effect. And in this way, what we did is we have more manipulation about race. So in case you don't understand what I'm showing you here, so this is a kind of technique you can manipulate. The face looks like Asian or versus the Caucasian, and you can manipulate the proportion of Asian. So in this way, the proportion here indicates the amount of Asianness among the faces, right? The female faces or the male faces. We can manipulate it in a very sophisticated way. I'm very happy to share code. It can keep your computer running for hours, and which warm up your space very easily. And what we found here, so we have undergrad students, adults, and so it's kind of busy, a little bit busy. So the y-axis indicates the size of illusion. X-axis in terms of size of other raceness. So the more towards the right, the more other race toward, relative to the participant. So we have Asian and Caucasian participants in this study. So just make sure it's not something about face, but it's about the membership of race. And so it's not very visually clear, but statistically, yes, significant. It shows, replicate what we found is the more other race the face was, the stronger illusion we found, as compared to more own race faces. Great. I was extremely happy about this result because it replicated what we found about race data that I just showed you. And then I was like, okay, that means this paradigm works very well. And so we move on to our kids. And so we actually did three child studies, quite a wide age range from 5 to 11 years old. And this age range is kind of usually, now people think about this as a critical period, thinking about how we developed our ability to recognize faces and process faces. a lot of hall markers about face processing, such as holistic processing, has been undergo significant developments between this age range, and that's how we target. So what you are looking at? So each individual dots represent a kid, so you can see how much money we have wasted here. X-axis indicate their age in years. Y-axis indicate the size of illusion. And it's not difficult to see the trending line represent a positive relation between their age and the illusion, the size of illusion you see. What we didn't see, unfortunately, here is we didn't see any differences between own or other race faces that were put on the screen. So these are children I have to, be clear. Unfortunately, I didn't. I'm sorry, I didn't really put here. Is the all Caucasian white kids we study here in Canada. So it seems like there's a developmental story here. With the increase of age, we're more likely to see the bottom face as a bigger one. Show the illusion. But it seems like the kids doesn't have any, it doesn't have the sensitivity to face race or relative to them. If we, just average those data, just based on the race, it seems like this is what we have for kids. They have the illusion about chance, about 50%, but the illusion had nothing to do with race. So it's great because you think about this. Oh, kids are great, not racism at all in this. But we just want to make sure because Canada is quite multicultural society. Kids have a lot of exposure, a lot of friends in their kindergarten, in their elementary school, right? So it might be they're just diverse experience, have those impact and help them to overcome their sensitivity to race. So we did another study in China with a similar age of kids. So for those of you who haven't been to China, so that's a city, that's a country, you don't see other race or Caucasian, white face very often. So actually the city we have the stats was, I think the Asian population takes more than 97% of the population. That's the city we study. And you see, they show the same result. Same in terms of the non-effect of race here, but they also show the illusion very good. So it seems like we replicate this. It has nothing to do. It seems to have nothing to do with our participants, their own personal experience. And I want to say something in addition to that before I jump into conclusion. That is, these cohort of participants that we studied in Southern Ontario, we actually have done a lot of studies. And some of the studies study their social biases. Some studies study their perceptual biases, such as the advantage to recognize own race faces, or the bias to favor own race individuals into different scenarios. And even with this cohort of kids, we tested around the same time. We found significant effect in terms of racial bias, in terms of perceptual bias. Sorry, racial perceptual bias and racial social. It's very hard, I would say. There are social bias based on race. So it's not like these kids are not sensitive to race at all. It's just in this task, it's very specific, unique to this task. The race hasn't really played a role yet. So this is very interesting findings compared to adults, which were also tested here in Canada. So I want to just conclude at this time. Then I'll bring back the development story in the next few more bullet points. So I will conclude the talk is, we found a highly robust face-specific phenomenon here called fat face illusion. It's so robust that impressed us for many years. And it seems like by manipulating the access to the face, by covering one of the eyes, suggests that might be this illusion index our sensitivity and the implicit representation of proximity of faces of individuals in our environment. and of course has a very strong social significance. From a development perspective, it undergoes continued development from childhood, 5-year-old to 11-year-olds. As you can see, the trending line, which is very beautiful. But also, the further development, even though at the adolescency, they are not at the same level as adults, which show the race effect on this illusion. And it seems like they were undergoing further development, and maybe driven by our experience with race in our environment, which may be happening during the adolescency before they come into the college or university. Methodologically, this illusion is highly flexible and efficient paradigm to measure a lot of things. In social psych, actually a lot of studies have been done to study how we perceive an object, if closer or farther away, a person, with very masculine, traits or, bias of perception. But that's very difficult to do, especially during COVID time, right? And this is a screen-based study. And you can do, it doesn't matter where the participant is. It doesn't matter how big their screen is. It doesn't matter where they are to show the illusion. So, and we can do this cross-culturally easily and in a very efficient way. So it can help us address a lot of social psych questions in the future. Actually, that's something we're doing. We're not going to review. I think that's everything I have. At the end, I want to thank the funding agency who pays all the bills, and my collaborators from different countries. I've been working with them since I was a kid, undergrad students. Some of them claim the first time they saw me, I was a baby. That's a false memory. But most importantly, I want to thank my PhD student, Vivian. I think is she here? Oh, she's here. So she's been doing a fantastic job. I think you should all give her applause. This is amazing. What I'm doing here is taking credit on my students' hard work, and I really appreciate all the hard work, and this is fantastic work. And every time she comes to me, I say, you know what, it's significant. It cannot be true. Then I analyze data. Oh my God, it's really significant. But then, full of surprise during COVID, which is, something good. And also, Alicia, who was a thesis student and graduated earlier this year, and now she's a master's student, not in PhD anymore, but still she did a fantastic job in terms of case study here, and also a lot of members in our lab who helped the project in a difficult time and maybe get something out of it. Okay, thank you so much for your attention, and please, if you have any questions, I think this is a good time.
Just maybe you said this and I missed it. Did you control eye movements in the presentations? Of where were people looking?
Oh, good question. So in terms of how we control where they start looking at, right? So we always reset their looking at the center between the two faces. Every trial, they have to click the cross at the center. So that's how we control their looking.
And they weren't, and they didn't move their eyes during the trial, so it was always in between the two faces?
No, that's at the beginning, before we show the two faces. But then it's free. They're free to see, watch whatever they want to see, and it doesn't matter. Actually, we have eye tracking data, and it doesn't show any relation between the illusion and how they look at the two faces.
I guess a follow-up question. I was wondering is it really top and bottom, or is it lower and upper visual field? So if you force them to, let's say, look at the top face, or does it have any effect?
We never force participants to do that because online study it's impossible to force them to do. But what we did was, as a pilot study, is we put the two faces at the lower part of the screen, or the two faces at the top part of the screen, top half of the screen, and the illusion is the same. So that kind of helps us to address the question in terms of whether it's visual field dependent, because you're all in the same visual field. And we didn't see any differences there. Yes, Joe.
So, really impressive how robust the effect is, like for faces. Like you said, for objects, it's not.
No.
But one illusion I'm thinking about is
Yes. Yes.
So does that?
You're right.
I'm almost thinking about the shape of the face.
Yes.
Is it bigger on top than the bottom?
Exactly.
Are
Exactly.
you making an incorrect comparison between?
Exactly. So, Joe, my hats off to you. So you got it. So what Joe mentioned actually is very, very critical for this illusion. So faces, it's not it's not a ball. So top is much wider as compared to bottom, right? Joe, that's what you mentioned. So it's similar, can create those visual illusions. You're right, actually, Joe. That's a factor can contribute to this illusion. But we actually have a lot of data. For example, all of the data which I showed you was have an oval mask, so the face look exactly the same, doesn't have any difference in top and bottom. And also, one critical study had been done here was this one. This one.
Yeah.
So it's impression of face drive the solution, but the shape of face definitely will increase, will add on top of it.
But even that second condition,
Mm-hmm.
if I did eye tracking, maybe I'm kind of looking at the two eyes and then looking straight up to the mouth.
Yeah.
And and that's the comparison I'm making rather than transposing the eyes from this one all the way to the top. That's the comparison I should make.
Yeah.
But I'm probably making the easier.
Yeah, you're right. That's one strategy, but we didn't see any relation between how you look at which one you look at first and impact the size of illusion. And actually, our participants respond very quickly, and they don't even need to move their eyes. They can get this done. Actually, we have some data to not data, it's a study, pilot study to do is very rapid presentation that doesn't allow you to move your eyes. They still show the illusion. Actually, it's stronger. Yeah.
And when I was looking at the dominant versus submissive faces, I kind of in my own head made the correct prediction of where the data would go by, because the dominant faces are kind of they're shaded more.
Yeah.
It's they take up more area.
Yeah, it seems like you're the reviewer. You are the reviewer that we, so I'm going to show you, sorry, let me do this. You know what? This is our strategy to deal with reviewer number 2. So the left side is something I already showed. On the right side was we swap the brightness, like the shaded. So now submissive face is more shaded on the right side, and we replicate the study. Replicate the finding. So yes, you're right, Joe. So low-level features play a significant role for sure, but that's not the key element that drives this illusion or modulate this illusion. It's about the face and what the face is about and drive the illusion. But thank you, Joe. So it's an excellent question. Yeah, Dave.
So I've got a different perspective on this. We did something like this in sound a while ago. If you play a low voice, which sounds more dominant, from a speaker that's low to the ground versus one that's high up, it sounds larger. The high voice, which is more submissive, doesn't change.
Oh.
If we play it on the right-hand side, it sounds larger. If we play on the left-hand side, it sounds smaller.
Wow.
So, with the right and left, I wonder if it switches if you're from a language that goes right to left, or you write numbers right to left. And so I wonder if there's something common going on here, like a common underlying reason why this is happening in such a similar fashion, or if both of these things are kind of independent cognitive processes that have converged, or if there's something central controlling them.
Yeah, you're asking whether there's this shared representation of space and relative to different maybe social signals, right? Like the dominant one is more like the bottom, and left to right in terms of reading experience. Maybe, but there are some recent studies start to show, at least in the domain of face perception, it's a lot of things are spatially related, and we have no idea how this represent in the brain, and maybe they share some shared neural network that represent signals from across different modalities, vision and auditory. That's something that would be very interesting to see. at this time, we don't. Yeah. But maybe it's related to our learning of explicit the regularity in the environment, right? That could be share some mechanism how we acquire those representations. In terms of where they actually represent, we don't have data. Yes, Beth? Sorry.
It's hard for me to imagine what I don't actually see this illusion from up here anyway. I'm just trying to understand or get an intuition of how big the illusion is, and what you can do is
4%.
It's a 4% change in the size.
Yeah. So 4% as if you see the bottom one 4% larger than the top one.
Yeah. And if you just did like a blob discrimination in size, is that near threshold, or what's the Weber fraction for that? Is it near threshold, or is threshold and size discrimination pass?
Oh, that's actually quite significant size differences. It's definitely about your threshold. It's not like you're not able to tell differences. I think we have some, I cannot remember, that's too far away. I think we in the early days we did something like that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Gabriel, I'm wondering if the effect, I noticed you didn't have a control side by side.
We do have. We do.
Side by side?
Yeah.
This way? I didn't see it.
Oh yeah, of course. It's for reviewers.
Oh, thank you. But my question is, does the effect persist if it's top and bottom side by side? In other words, can you get disparity this way, and when does the
yeah. So the data I don't remember whether we have done this because at that time. But we actually talked about this design, put this diagonal display. I don't think we have data for that.
I was more concerned about, do they have to be lined up?
It doesn't have to be.
Yeah,
you can have some offset. I know this because in one of the early studies we messed up the location by social effect. But I do not know what would be the limit. How far you can offset the two faces in this way.
And my second question was about just if you could just re-explain the rationale for why do we think dominant faces would be perceived as being closer?
Yeah, so dominance is a very significant social trait we perceive from faces. And so what we interpret this is it represents a self-relevant, very significant self-relevant information, because you immediately will connect the dominance to you. And so it's consistent with theory. There's some theory, one theory called threat signal theory, then whatever you see threat signals or something more relevant, social relevant to the observer, and our perception system will just pull them close to us. And that's how we interpret the data and how we predict our study in the first place. And it's similar to some animal behavior studies. When you put a hungry rat, I don't think it's a mouse study, but definitely the animal study is you can manipulate how hungry they are. They actually perceive the food much closer to them. I don't know how they measure for it. I completely forgot the detail, but that's the similarities we use to make our argument. Is our perception system is constantly trying to adapt to the environment, and given your current status, I would say, then our perceptions will be manipulated in that way. So I think dominance will play a similar role, and to prove something more important to you closer, and so then maybe give you a better opportunity to perceive them, prioritize your perception.
Thank you.
Two questions. So on following up on that one, did you get any measure of the observer's perception of dominance versus?
Yes.
Does it correlate? Like the more they agree that this is a dominant face.
We never check their rating with their illusion, because the rating is quite consistent and there's not too much variation.
Oh, like everybody kind of agrees.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah, they all agree. This is.
Yeah. Okay. My other one is, have to be something special about faces, or like you hinted, is it just about statistical regularity, right? So your control object clocks, there can be really tiny clocks or really huge clocks, but faces are fairly biologically constrained.
Yep.
And so you can develop some expectations about its size, and knowing the relative distance to you, you would do some calculations. And I think of that sitting here because Lucas was my TA through online learning, and all I saw was his face. So when I met him in person, I was quite shocked, right? Like, what? Where did this come from? So
I have the same shock.
So there's some expectation that we build about size, even with limited information, and maybe like the kids don't have enough exposure yet to have those, but as adults, like, so that's how the illusion perhaps appears.
Yes, I agree with you that it's related to experience, but I don't think it's really related to the size, although the task is all about size, because the picture on the screen is very small. It doesn't really represent any faces you see in everyday life, and it's more about the layout of the faces, and it signifies some implicit information about the relative distance to the observer.
Yes, but it's still relative size.
It's relative, yeah.
If you didn't have any expectation about the size of the face, then it wouldn't work. The illusion shouldn't work.
I don't think so. But it's key. The key element here is not about size. It's it's a layout. The face that on top is represent a person is at the behind. It's behind the person at the front. So that's the key element here. It's not about the size, the size of the faces I put there. Because of the vertical layout that creates this implicit depth information. Dave, then Pat, then we'll have some questions for students.
So 1 in 10 people don't have stereo vision.
Yeah.
So did you screen for stereo vision?
We didn't screen that. I was just being very honest here. Actually, this is something I really want to do. Is we can actually test a special population. They don't have stereo vision and see whether they have this illusion. And that's actually exactly something we want to do in person. Good question. Yeah. No, unfortunately. Pat?
I'm wondering if it's the vertical thing and you're referring distance somehow from the observer. Does it matter how far apart they are? Does the illusion go?
It does not. At least based on what we have, because Vivian did a great job because we did the study online. Actually, we can measure how big their size, the screen size is, and with a small or large screen, the distance, the physical distance between two faces actually varies accordingly. And we didn't see any relation between the size of the illusion, size of the monitors, represent the size of the distance between two faces and the illusion. So far, no. I think it's just to give not very accurate representation about how far the two faces are, but it's more about to indicate, oh yes, one is closer than the other. That I think that's the information we can get out of it from the layout. Yes, Jester.
So it makes sense that people further away should look smaller. But why should the brain?
Yeah.
Why should the brain
do the opposite way?
Why shouldn't it correct for that?
I think
make the top one look bigger?
You're like the other reviewer. So this is a very very important question. Why? So because if you say one face is behind the other one further away, then they should be smaller. But now on the screen you saw for example here all the physical size is the same. Then we should see the top one as larger, right? Why the opposite? Great question. So our interpretation is what you describe is very sophisticated calculation, right? It takes us several steps, right? You need to have the impression represent the size, physical size, then do a mapping, then do the calculation. So it's quite slow. But what we are talking about here, this illusion is a very fast effect. So we're thinking, theorize, there might be a different route. It's kind of fast and slow pathways. And so what the participant does here, usually they have the strongest illusion if they respond within 500 milliseconds, for example. This we have data. And so what happened here is they use what they have as a mental representation about how face work should be supposed to be laid out, top and bottom, and then immediately send out as a readout to interpret the faces on the screen, then give it this illusions. Oh, the bottom must be closer. I think what comes later might happen, or what comes later in the process might be similar to what you described. Oh, maybe, oh, wait a second, I need to think about this. Oh, the brain might have calculated, then, how to say, the illusion might decrease. Actually, that's consistent with our data. So we correlate the reaction time with the size of illusion. With longer reaction time, the illusion is getting smaller and smaller. So that's why we're thinking there might be two different pathways that help us to do. And this actually also makes sense. It's similar to our process of emotional signals, right? We have fast response, although not necessarily correct, but fast. But we also have a analytical process. It takes much slower, but more accurate. So I think it's the balance here, what we're talking about, which I think will be very exciting. We can design a study to further, verify this hypothesis. Yes, go on.
Really nice talk. You probably said this and I missed it. Why are we not interpreting this as a shorter and taller person?
Ah, interesting.
Why are we taking this as a proximity?
Yes, you're right. You're right. If it's a shorter or shorter or taller, or if it's a bigger, someone with a bigger head like me, I cannot put into scan fMRI scanner because I have bigger head, or smaller head, right? So that's an easy interpretation for the result. But none of the result, if that's the case, that should survive with one eye. It doesn't matter if you look at this one or two eyes. And because binocular vision plays a significant role in our perception of depth information. So that's how we perceive. Now, I don't want to take the credit all the time. So that's how we perceive, interpret that is likely related to depth information. And that's what our best guess based on what the data we have.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Gabriel. In that last experiment you described,
yeah.
You showed no race effect.
Yeah, good news, right?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to ask you, for some speculation as to why you think there's no race effect.
What I'm thinking is it takes time. It takes more experience to refine our representation of faces from own versus other race group. So it's not like they're not sensitive to race information. These kids are fully capable of showing perceptual bias or social bias in many different tasks. But on this part, they might not be, they might not there in terms of representing own versus other race faces in terms of the proximity in your peripersonal space. I think that's something undergoing further development. Maybe it takes even longer. So that's also something quite exciting, but also a little bit surprised because the lack of race effect kind of delays is much late than the race effect that we found usually in the childhood or early adolescence. I hate this.
Do you think that this is this idea about threat vigilance, for example, you talked about it in the context of dominance, but it could also be operating in the context of race, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So do you think they're sensitive to threat dominance? That's by the age that you're testing?
Yeah, I think so. I think, with more experience, you start to, I hate to say this, but, I think this is suggested by data is you probably start to see people from different categories with, different proximity. And something more relevant to you, to the observer, likely to perceive as closer, then allows you to provide more, cognitive resources to those stimuli or object in the environment. So that's our interpretation. But it seems like it takes much longer to emerge. But for the undergrad students who had no idea about the context of the task that we were studying, so all the undergrad students, they participated in the study, without knowing, oh, we actually asked their ethnicity. So they thought, oh, this is just a study. I signed up, I did the study. But at the very end, we asked, oh, what's your race? And so, even our adult participants, they were not aware of anything about race, but they just shown this quite significantly. So I think it takes a long time. Yes, the back, I think. Yeah, I think, please.
Willie, I was going to follow up. Could it be an age cohort effect where, so it was 5 to 11-year-olds, so the adults you did right now, you did them when they were 5 to 11 years old, because of social norms changing.
You're right, yeah. You're right, so that's
hopeful.
Yeah, you're right.
They will grow up to know that race effect.
But look at those Asian kids. Unfortunately, right? So we had the same thoughts. Yeah, we have the same. So, but then we brought the study to China, and those kids had zero experience with other race members. Then they show the same, which is kind of good. Yeah, please.
So you mentioned, I think, asked about where people look, like whether they're looking at specific features versus say the width of the face. And you mentioned that it didn't correlate with the size of the effect. So when you showed the dominance versus submission as a threat vigilance effect, I immediately thought of emotion, similar, angry versus neutral.
Yes.
Now obviously an angry face, the nose scrunches up, the eyes get closer. Do you think because of those mutual differences that would get rid of the effect, or do you think the effect would still stay? Because apparently it didn't matter where people were looking before.
Yeah, you're right. So what I mentioned about eye movement is, it doesn't matter in terms of how you explicitly allocate your attention. But what eye tracker cannot do is to capture your peripheral vision. So this is quite small, two faces on the screen. You don't even need to move your eyes. You can see, oh, there are two faces. I can see the bottom one's bigger. Then move on. They don't need to see those. So those are things cannot be captured by eye tracker, our eye tracking technique at this moment. But maybe some internal features can manipulate and modulate. I won't say manipulate, but modulate the effect, because actually we have data not showing here, exactly manipulating facial expression, happy versus angry. Somehow people just report based on the data. They just saw the happy face is bigger than angry faces. And so we have to redo the study this term and to control this. But you're right. So there's some certain key features will make the face look bigger or smaller that can be problematic for this paradigm. So we have to be very, very careful. But thank you. Okay, maybe one last question. Yes, Paul. Yeah.
Okay, a fun speculative question for you. Do you think people who have prosopagnosia
I think they should still have the effect, because those kind of symptoms, you don't recognize faces, or you don't want to recognize faces. But that's more about identifying who the face is. But here, you only need to have the impression this is the face. I think that's it. You saw that's all we need. You have the representation. This is a human face. I think the illusion should emerge. So it happened at a quite early stage, maybe at a categorical stage rather than a fine processing about who the face is. Yeah. Okay. No. Oh, yeah. One last one.
Sorry. You mentioned, I think someone else asked, you mentioned that reaction time correlated with the size of the effect.
Yes.
You had one study where you had rapid.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's after we saw, reaction time actually matters a lot. One participant, every trial, he or she spent 7 seconds to respond. It's desperate, and she didn't show. Sorry, I revealed her gender. Participant didn't show the effect, and so we started looking to, there was a negative correlation. So then we designed the fast presenting.
So did you compare the fast presentation to just like a regular presentation of the study?
Not directly, because we just randomly run, and I don't have data to speak to that. Yeah, maybe it's stronger. That's what we have so far from the collected data with unrestricted presentation time. Yeah, but that could be interesting. Thank you.
Can we all thank Gabriel?
I need to return this. You can easily self-patch.
Two quick things. One, I just wanted to make a plug for Coggy Talk tomorrow. Vivian, is that correct? So Vivian will be giving a Coggy Talk where I can imagine many of the same concepts being brought up.
No,
there.
it's different.
It's totally different. It's actually completely new. Yeah. That's in room 205 at 3:30 tomorrow.
3:30? Yeah. You can see, you can follow the smell because we have pizza ready, so you can follow the smell. You got it. Hopefully you can all make it. Although tomorrow there's no class, but there's pizza and drink.
And one more, Patrick Barclay next week, hosted by Sigal Balsheim here.
Well, it's hosted by the Margot Wilson Memorial Lecturer Fund, and it's going to be quite the talk. Lots of people are going to come from lots of different departments, economics, anthropology, biology. We hope you guys will all come. There's going to be a fancier reception afterwards, so please come to that as well. And Pat's really excited to talk to anyone who wants to talk to him. So if you want to meet him, he's very, very cool. He's going to be talking about reputation and cooperation and some new theoretical developments. Please come.
Yes. Reception in 205 right now.
I don't think so. There's no reception. No, there's no reception. No reception. I got no. I heard no.
Maybe there's a reception.
No, I told no. No, okay, whatever.
I double checked with Ali and everything. He said yes, there's a reception. The email said
really?
Reception, yeah.
What?
You gotta show up for a reception.
I mean, there's no, so like, okay.
Oh, shoot. Okay.
It's okay.
The email said reception,
Well, oh boy.